This is Clayton Howe's Entertainment X.
For this episode, I chat with Annabeth Gish, and we cover a little bit of everything from her early inspirations in entertainment of reading books and theater to mentors and standout lessons and early projects that taught her a significant amount about herself. And of course, Succession. So I hope you enjoy this part one with Annabeth Gish. We're back. I'm Clayton Howe, and today with me on Zoom is Annabeth Gish. Annabeth, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi. I'm so happy to be here.
There's so much I want to talk about with your life and career. I promise we won't go through the entire resume today. Talk about Mayfair Witches. I'd love to hear about X-Files, collaborations and relationships in this industry. Before we get to any of that, I want to take it back to the beginning of time for you. What were your entertainment dreams growing up?
Well, I was always a lover of books, deep. I mean, I would get immersed and lost in reading from an early age or being read to. That was where my love of the imaginative world started. And the seed of it, I guess. I mean, I remember one Halloween, maybe I was 7 or 8, and my mom had made some Halloween costume, and I was playing a movie star, which was for a Halloween,
Sure.
glitter and all of that. And I suppose even then I knew I wanted to be in the movies. I would practice little speeches in the mirror, whether it was a Coke commercial or my acceptance speech or some of those things. And those seem a little bit egotistical or narcissistic. But from an inception point, I knew I wanted to act. And I started doing local theater in Iowa when I was 8, and continued my love of that, with that throughout my life, And there was a course, for sure, a course that I both worked at diligently and very hard and still do, but then also an unfolding that happened to me as well. I was living in Cedar Falls, Iowa. It wasn't exactly the place where people were discovered at 13.
Sure. What was the, growing up, what were your parents teaching you about work ethic?
Both of my parents are hard workers. I grew up with both parents working daily. My mom was a teacher. My father was a professor, and both worked very hard. I grew up middle class, and a family of 5, 3 kids. And they were always very, the arts were very important. My father was an English professor, and my mom also. I was just dancing and music and arts were very important. And I caught the bug. And, even though, I started very young and my parents were very active in that career development, they had to be to get me places. And,
Sure.
It was always very diligent about professionalism, being prepared, saving your money,
Yep.
not, choosing carefully things that were in alignment with value systems. We were all fumbling our way as we went, but they definitely imprinted a very strong work ethic and professional in me.
Did you have any mentors growing up? Are there any standout lessons from any particular mentors?
From one of my first acting teachers, Greta, to one of my first directors, F. Scott Regan. So many influenced me. Jon Voight, who was one of the first people I worked with on Desert Bloom, and Ellen Barkin and Jo Beth Williams. Those were very indelible presence, like people that really affected my first experience and set a standard for sure.
What was the self-talk for you in having a clear vision on where you wanted to head or where you knew you were heading and staying true to that as more outside forces come in and and put their own opinions on what you should be doing in your life.
Yes, so complicated, all of that, especially in a teenage mindset, and
Yes.
and naive and innocent, and yet drawn to something and feeling purposeful, and starry-eyed for sure.
Sure.
Fame wasn't what I was chasing necessarily, because we all know how fame is, it can be toxic for many people.
Yeah.
But just wanting to be connected to the arts. Self-talk at 13. That was what it was like. Self-talk, my dog barking. It was always very interesting to find my own sense of self-esteem, my own identity, apart from the characters that I was beginning to play, and apart from my parents. I got thrust into this world in the 80s that was, a lot of successful chick flicks of the time, or 80s movies, Shag, Mystic Pizza, Hiding Out, the kind of eclectic 80s movies. And yet I knew I really drove the decision. I wanted to go to college at the time, right after Mystic Pizza came up, because I knew I needed an education. I knew I needed more groundedness in order to survive, what else was out there.
Mm-hmm. That's very wise for a child, essentially, to tell themselves, I need to step away from all of this and go study at a university before I come back into it.
Yeah.
What was the journey even after college, making that move back? Was it a very common sense? Had you been missing it after 4 years?
It's funny you say wisdom, but I probably say fear. I mean, I did not know. I knew I didn't have the tools to make it alone without training, both in life and acting. But yes, I had the luxury also of going to college. I went to Duke University and knowing what I wanted to do afterwards, and so college was really just this beautiful experience of, what do I want to study? Knowing that it all would infuse my job of choice,
sure,
rather than having to go on a specific path, but yes, I always knew I wanted to go back. I knew it was going to be LA. And yeah, I literally drove cross country from Durham, North Carolina to then Albuquerque, where my parents were, the little stopover. And then I drove out to Los Angeles and set up shop.
What was that, if you can recall it, what was that early talk, I guess, against fear, or when self-doubt creeps into the mind? What is the self-talk for you to move on through?
Well, again, I think anyone who pursues a career in this particular field or industry has a bit of a gambler side to them,
Sure.
because it is a gamble. You never know. There's no real job security. But I was buoyed by the fact that after I graduated, I got cast in Wyatt Earp, Lawrence Kasdan's movie with Kevin Costner. And so that was like initially a wonderful kind of launching pad for this second part of my career.
Yeah. Were there any standout lessons? I'm curious about Wyatt Earp. Were there any particular standout moments and lessons from the top performers that you're working with? Just little things you'd hear or anything that stood out to you? Or
Well, that particular set was just a cadre of movie stars, right? It was Dennis Quaid, it was Kevin Costner, it was just so many amazing, and Lawrence Kasdan himself was a filmmaker star. When you get to work with people like that, you see star quality, you see hustle, you see fight. Fight in a passionate way, what makes people survive in this industry,
Yeah. And through the TV and film credits, because was there a standout for you on which one you were focusing on to perform more on television or versus film? Or is it really just kind of like, I want to perform, in LA, we'll see where it goes kind of thing?
Well, it's interesting. I had only done feature films before I went to college. I did a television movie with Jenna Rollins my spring semester that I took off to do. It was called Silent Cries, and it was a wonderful experience. But I think, features was kind of where it was in the big scope.
Sure.
But then everything started to change, I mean, it was just the precipice of how television was becoming a new platform that would become so diverse. And I think X-Files definitely, that was my first. I had done a few pilots that never really took off, and guest starred on some television shows, but X-Files and that series' regular role was a first for me, and very important in my trajectory, I think, and endurance.
In terms of performing and having such and I thank you for having such honest, vulnerable performances in everything that I've seen you in. It's an education. And I think I say this a lot, I think it leaves the world a better place when people have extreme talent and they use it. And you do a great disservice if you don't use your talent. So I appreciate that. So thank you. I'm curious, how has that made you better at communicating and listening?
My God, in every single way. It's such a good question. As an actor, you really make a point of studying nuance, tone, intention, psychology, things behind what's said. It really is a question of nuance, I think, and you really have to be I personally think I prefer actors who actively listen. There are some people that I've worked with who are just, they just say their line, they know what they're going to do, they know how their performance is going to go, as opposed to listening and then be affected by what you're hearing as if for the first time.
Right.
And I think there's something magical when you really do open your ears. You obviously come prepared, your words, but when there's an ability to have a clear channel to the moment in performance, then I think it is absolutely an imperative skill to take into your own life of personal relationships as well. Just listening to what's not said,
There was some point after college where I really started to listen, and it's amazing how much is said to you. If you really just listen to the way it's said and what's being told in a business, negotiating, performing, any of it, it all comes out if you really listen.
Yes, I agree. And tuning into that frequency, it's such a beautiful part of our instrument as human beings, but also as actors or writers or what creatively. Like if you're listening, you just get so many, not to sound X-Filey, but the downloads that we can receive if we are channels of readiness, just an openness, and of course sometimes we aren't because shit gets in the way, and we put on defenses and armors and all of those things to not listen, because that's just the human experience,
It's amazing how much easier though it all flows when you do.
Yes, I agree.
Communication. In your life and really in work, how have you found the balance between making things happen and letting things happen?
Ooh, that would be the secret sauce of peace.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
I wish I had that in a bottle. I as I get older and I think there it's both. I often talk about this as a parent too, with my 2 teenage sons, you know, the importance of effort and ambition and hustle versus also then the idea of being in the flow and letting things happen, allowing, you know, surrendering. There has to be some holding the tension between those two, you know, ridiculously opposite
Yes.
points of being. Yes. But I think, you know, to answer your question more specifically, you know, some things in my career have happened because you know, not giving up is a massive, you know, I think it's a very good positive thing to do. Having endurance and maintaining mental health, trying to while you're enduring, you know, because there are highs and lows, and there have been really peak moments and then troughs of, you know, times when I haven't worked. So it's imperative that you kind of learn to straddle that line.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.